Hello there. Welcome into a Monday edition of the show. Yes, I am back in studio, back from Vegas. Thanks again to the folks at Circus Sports for just a top-notch experience for a couple of days out there in Vegas, and I look forward to getting back there perhaps in the very near future. But I'm glad to be back, and I'm glad once again to be talking to you, although that was not a thing in Vegas. I would talk to you out there, but now I'm talking to you here in studio. And I'm happy to have you join me, whether it's on your radio, online at extrasports1300.com, or through the new Extra Sports 1300 app, sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health and well-being for all. A veritable cornucopia of sports topics coming your way over the course of the next 3 hours, and a veritable cornucopia of prizes to be given away. I'm not above bribing you to listen to this radio program. And I'm sorry that I have made you feel like I am opposed to it, because I'm not. Air Force Merrimack tickets for Saturday. Switchbacks Memphis tickets for Wednesday night. And Ludacris at the Colorado State Fair tickets for Saturday. All will be given away not only today, but throughout the week on this program. Brent Bergman, the Gazette, will join me in about 17 minutes to get the week leading up to the opener for Air Force kicked off. Kick off the week before kickoff. How about that? But I start today with the Broncos preseason finale yesterday against the Arizona Cardinals. And it's not surprising that with no Bo Nix playing, somebody had to get the hype. And it is appropriate that it happens to be another quarterback in Zach Wilson. 16 of 25, 251 yards, 2 tutties, and a rushing tutty. Now, I will not deny how well Zach Wilson did. He played great. I will only remind you that he was a top 2 pick who has spent 3 years in the NFL, during which he has appeared in 34 NFL games, being showcased for a trade by one of the best play callers in the NFL, going against a group of players who many will not be employed by the Arizona Cardinals in the next 48 hours. The difference between Zach Wilson and Bo Nix is that Bo Nix is coming in at their level. Like, I get it. He's a first-round pick as opposed to 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and undrafted rookies that he was going against, especially early in the preseason. But Bo Nix is getting in at the ground floor, right? He has no experience. This was his first NFL experience. So I feel like the hype is a little bit more worthy of being given to what we've seen through 2 games from Bo Nix than what we have seen from Zach Wilson. But you can see the talent that the Jets saw when they drafted him a few years ago. And you can also see the talent that Sean Payton saw to make him want to bring Zach Wilson under his wing. And that's what Sean Payton talked about yesterday.
We had some impressive throws. The one shot play, in the hole to Brandon. And then, I mean, he's got a live arm down the field. I thought he threw it away when it wasn't there. There were a couple sacks, but overall, we moved the ball. You're trying to measure, hey, how's the offense doing when he's in there? And plenty of time on the play clock, enough time to get in and out of plays if we need be. And I think, he's had the better part of the last 2.5 weeks, really. I mean, you guys have seen his practices.
Now, as Sean Payton mentioned in there, you also saw what ultimately got him run out of New York, especially that early pass that was very close to being a pick six. So there's still some of bad Zach Wilson in there, but it was far outweighed by the good yesterday. But the purpose of yesterday, let's not lose the plot here. The purpose of yesterday and all the doting on Zach Wilson that Sean Payton has done over the last couple of weeks is to entice another team to trade for him. Not to decide whether he is the second string quarterback of the Denver Broncos. And I think Sean Payton, and to Zach Wilson's credit, Zach Wilson himself did as much as they possibly could to get a team to bite. Now, as of right now, nobody has. But the season is long. Injuries happen. Payton has done this before. He got Teddy Bridgewater paid by the Carolina Panthers. He got Jameis Winston, still gainfully employed in the National Football League by the Cleveland Browns. But as of today, Zach Wilson will be on the Denver Broncos roster as a rare third quarterback, and I fully expect him to be listed as such on the roster because Sean Payton says finances will not play a role in whether the Broncos cut down from 3 quarterbacks to 2.
No, we've got enough money to I understand the question. We feel comfortable with those 3 quarterbacks. I think I've told you already, I see the 3 of them making it.
Now, ironically, some news that has just come out a little while ago regarding someone in the wide receiver room, Tim Patrick, would make you question a bit whether the Broncos are unwilling to make any financial moves. But when it comes to the quarterbacks, letting go of Jared Stidham or letting go of Zach Wilson for nothing are not on the table just to save a few bucks. Zach Wilson is a project. He's a hobby for Sean Payton. And I don't think it's a one training camp project. But if somebody wanted to take Zach Wilson off of the Broncos' hands, I'm sure they would be willing to do it. Given the stakes of this season and what Jared Stidham is as a backup, the small range of outcomes guy, the more predictable known commodity, I don't think if anything should happen to Bo Nix, that Zach Wilson should be the next man up. Now, there's another aspect to being a backup quarterback that has been bandied about the last 24 hours, and that has to do with the support that a backup quarterback is supposed to give the starter, even if it comes at the expense of them being the starter. Some comments by both Jared Stidham and Zach Wilson have made people question who is more willing to do that. First, here is Zach Wilson on Bo Nix being named the starter.
Yeah, I was excited for him. I mean, I don't think it was a surprise too much, obviously, right? I think he's had a great camp. I told him I'm excited for him for this opportunity. I really believe that they're putting him in a good situation. I think Sean has done a phenomenal job, and then the guys that we get to hang out with, starting with Davis and then Joe and Pete and then Johnny Moe, we have a great offensive staff. I think they do a great job. And then Bo has just continued to keep getting better, so I'm excited to see what he can do. And I think he's ready for it.
It is a different tone than what Jared Stidham struck when he was asked the same question, essentially.
First of all, obviously I was very disappointed. I know I'm a starting quarterback in this league. I have zero doubts about that. And, it just didn't shake out my way. But I know what kind of player, kind of person I am. And like I said earlier, I'll be ready to go if I need to be. And, like I said, I have no doubts that I'm a starting caliber quarterback in this league.
Now, obviously, those comments were picked up by a lot of outlets and are being discussed quite a bit today, including right now by me. So the Broncos, being the crack PR team that they are, made sure that they put out a tweet today with essentially the rest of his comments, where he said that he would support Bo Nix if he needed him to. But Jared Stidham led off with his disappointment, and that has led some, coupled with the performance of Zach Wilson yesterday, to say Zach Wilson should be the second quarterback. I actually think the supportive role is a little overblown. I kind of like a backup quarterback that believes he's a starter. Now, let me be very clear on this. Jared Stidham has not been, is not, and will probably never be a starting caliber quarterback in the National Football League. But that doesn't matter. All that matters is that he believes he is. Yes, at first blush, it seems like Zach Wilson is more supportive of Bo Nix than Jared Stidham. But what I also heard was one guy in Zach Wilson that's just happy to be here, and one in Jared Stidham that's not just happy to be here, that wants to compete. And I think that has been a tone that both of those quarterbacks have set throughout training camp. And you understand why. The arrival of Aaron Rodgers in New York put his football mortality right in front of the face of Zach Wilson. From that point on, there was a non-zero chance that Zach Wilson would not be on an NFL roster in short order. He has been given a second chance, and it's a great second chance by someone who has made a pretty good career of rehabilitating quarterbacks that need a second chance. We learned last year, to a degree that we have rarely seen, that it matters who you have as the second quarterback. And it's different than other positions. It's not just about, hey, this guy is more talented. Kind of think it should be, but it's not. If you're going to be that proverbial one play away from going into a game, the coach needs to know what he can expect. And I'm sorry. An entire season, a couple of starts, and some preseason for Jared Stidham trumps a training camp and 3 preseason games for Zach Wilson. You can't tell me that Sean Payton would call upon Jared Stidham before, or call on Zach Wilson before Jared Stidham. And just play this game out. Okay, Zach Wilson has outplayed Jared Stidham in this preseason. I will concede that point. Let's fast forward. Game on the line, Bo Nix twists an ankle. Who are you calling on? middle of the game. Broncos need it. Or let's even go further. We certainly hope nothing happens to Bo Nix, but let's say there's something late in the season that keeps him from playing, and the Broncos are still in the playoff conversation. You giving the ball to Zach Wilson in a spot start right now? I don't think you could seriously consider that. Year 2 with Zach Wilson in Denver, if they decide to bring him back, we'll revisit that idea when the time comes. But if anything were to happen to Bo Nix, I think you'd want Jared Stidham out on that field, even if he is not as kumbaya and as supportive of Bo Nix as Zach Wilson is. Zach Wilson did exactly what Sean Payton wanted him to do. He showcased the talent while minimizing the things that got him run out of the Jets. But that is not enough to supplant Jared Stidham as the second quarterback in Denver. Maybe it will be enough for a team after these rosters get cut down to get the Broncos some future draft capital. That's what yesterday was about. That's what the whole Zach Wilson thing was about to begin with. Credit to him. He did everything he could. He's not QB2, he's QB3. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on Zach Wilson. Do you think he should be that one play away if something were to happen to Bo Nix? Take your thoughts on it. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, Air Force kicks off their 2024 season at home against Merrimack. What to expect from Saturday's opener and for the Falcons all season from the man who knows the team better than anybody, at least from a media standpoint. I feel like Troy Calhoun knows the team better than anybody, but second to Troy Calhoun might be Brent Brigham, the Gazette beat writer, joins me next on Extra Sports 1300. You know, this weekend was about as good of an appetizer as you could get when it comes to the college football season. But let's be real. The main course is served up this week, including Air Force beginning their season at home against Merrimack. Joining me now is the man who has covered the Falcons for how many years now, Brent? Have you been on the Falcons beat?
I believe this will be season 13. So it's been a while.
Lucky number 13. Brent Brigman of the Gazette is my guest. Good to talk to you. Want to start with, is there anything about this team prior to the opener that you are sure about? Good, bad, indifferent. Is there anything that you're like, I know this about this football team?
You know, that's an excellent question. And no, there is absolutely nothing that I can say with certainty. I have a lot of hunches, a lot of assumptions, but no, there is nothing that you can say with absolute certainty. Because even some of the better players, like, you know, established players like Cam Goff, he missed all of last year. Peyton Zadroik, who, you know, has been a force up front, has been injured, you know, missed all of the spring semester, hasn't really practiced fully very often in the fall. So the guys you would think you can bank on, you really can't. You can make assumptions, and then the system itself, you know, has just so many new people running it. So no, that maybe the kicker, Matt DePore, he's solid. I'll give you that. That's about it.
There we go. It makes Saturday more intriguing, if nothing else, with that. Talking about the quarterback position, and look, as much as I would love to see Air Force put more of the air into Air Force, I know what they are. I know how they win. It's a proven formula, and John Boucher is going to fit into that. However, when you look at his predecessor, is this about as different as you could get going from Zach Larrier to John Boucher, given their skill sets?
Yes, but you know, the thing about, and I think the reason you say that, obviously, Zach Larrier was a track champion, had great top end speed, whereas John Boucher, the reputation he brings in is that he's known more for throwing than running.
Mm-hmm.
However, my counter to that would be, you know, Zach Larrier, as fast as he was in the open field, wasn't like someone like Arion Worthman, a previous quarterback, who was just a lot quicker on the first step running the option, a lot more shifty. You know, Zach Larrier didn't stand out in his speed at the line of scrimmage. It was just when he broke through to the next level and he was outrunning defensive backs where you could really see that speed. And from what I've heard, I haven't really seen it yet, John Boucher has that feel for running the option. And he's 6'2". So, you know, those first steps, he's going to cover some ground. And he ran for more than 1,000 yards in high school. So when you're talking about like just getting to the line of scrimmage, I don't think it's going to be that eye-openingly different. Obviously, these guys, you know, if you stood them next to each other and had them run a 100-yard dash, it's not going to be a contest. But I don't think it's going to be that markedly different in terms of how they begin to run the offense, you know, from the offensive backfield through the pitch.
Do you think, I looked this up, taking out Hawaii and Army for obvious reasons, Army got off the rails, and Hawaii was where Zach Larrier got hurt. I think he only averaged like 5 passes a game or something like that. Do you think that within reason we'll see Air Force throw the ball a bit more with John Boucher's other talents?
You know, I don't think that those play calls are going to be dependent upon the talent level of who's playing quarterback. I think it's entirely based on how the game is going. I just know Mike Thiessen, if he can run the ball, you know, 68 times a game, that's what he's going to do. You know, yes, he'll take his shots here and there just because you got to keep the defense honest, you know, keep some defensive backs back. But I just think that's the blueprint Air Force operates from, is they want to eat clock. They want to pick up first downs. They really don't care about the stats and how they're beating you. So if they can beat you on the ground, they're going to. I think what this provides is if they do get off schedule and they see some 3rd and longs, or they need to have a comeback, they've got a guy who they can trust a little more in those situations. But when the games are going as they want them to go, I really don't think the play calling is going to be all that different.
Brent Brigman of the Gazette previewing not only Saturday's game against Merrimack, but the upcoming season for the Air Force Falcons. And, we could talk about the quarterbacks and we could talk about the running back room, but really the identity of this team over the last few years has been its offensive line. And like virtually every other position, it's going to look much, much different. Do you think there's going to have to be a little bit of a shift to, like, this offensive line can still be good? And I heard Mike Thiessen say the other day that, essentially through Coach Lobo, all things are possible. But do you think that there's a little bit more onus on the skill position players to kind of pick up a little bit of the slack, at least until this new look offensive line gets their feet underneath them?
I understand the tendency to believe that, but I just don't think it's going to be that big of a transition, as crazy as that seems when you are replacing all 5 starters. And I say that just because I saw them do this 2 or 3 years ago, where they lost all 5 starters and they just didn't skip a beat. And I think it's just, that's where Air Force is, the way they're structured is such an advantage in this way, and that everybody they have starting right now on the offensive line is a junior or senior. They've been in the program 3-4 years. You learn from Coach Lobo. They've learned from the guys in front of them. And it's just a natural progression that now they get to take the first team snaps as opposed to coming in later in games or rotating in, as some of them did on occasion. I just don't think you're going to see much of a change. I mean, yes, it would certainly help if, Dylan Carson or whoever else is running the ball can break a few tackles. If somebody sneaks through, first man doesn't take him down, that helps. But I guess I've just learned to trust what Air Force does up front. And I just don't see the names on the back of the uniform changing really impacting the way Air Force plays up front, simply because, they're not leaning on transfers. They're not, these aren't JUCO guys who have never run Air Force's stuff. Like, these guys have run it over and over and over again for years. So it's just not that different running it in practice over and over versus running it in Falcon Stadium. So I really think they've earned the benefit of the doubt in this regard.
The rest of the Mountain West around Air Force, while Air Force may look a lot different on the roster and on the field, their coaching staff remains intact. And that cannot be said about a lot of teams in the Mountain West. I don't know if you want to put a number on it, but how far do you think that goes, given what the Mountain West looks like this year and how many of those teams Air Force has on their schedule?
Yeah, I mean, it's massive. And I mean, to understand just how drastic it is, I mean, Troy Calhoun's going into his 18th year. And so is, Mike Thiessen beside him, Matt McGettigan, who runs, strength and conditioning. And then a lot of the assistants are grads and are in years, 5 through 15. These guys have all been around for a while. And you're talking about a conference that has 8 new coaches. And then the longest tenured coach behind Troy Calhoun is up in Fort Collins. And he's been there. This is year 3. It's unbelievable how much experience Air Force has versus almost everybody on their schedule. Army being an exception. But even then, you're talking about a 10-year difference roughly. So it is, and then you couple that with the fact that, like I said, all of these guys have been in the program throughout. So you're not talking about, newcomers who just arrived in August earlier this month. Like, these are all people who have seen it, who have done it. Even if it was from the sideline, most of these guys traveled. Every week that's going to be an advantage. Unless you run into a UNLV type situation from last year or Utah State a few years ago, where the new kid in town has the new tricks that nobody has seen yet, or they brought in a quarterback or something like that. And then you're kind of scrambling to adjust to what's new. But even when Air Force is scrambling to adjust, they have such a wealth of knowledge to draw from because they have seen all of this before. They know how to adjust because they've seen it. So you really can't measure just how valuable that is, but it is a big advantage for Air Force.
Obviously you set aside the 2 Service Academy games, and those weigh so heavily on whether a season is successful or not. But outside of Army and Navy, what are the 2, maybe 3 games that you look at and you say, these are going to ultimately determine how good this season is for Air Force? Call them must wins, call them pivotal games, what you will. But what are the 2 or 3 games that you look at and you say, if Air Force is going to be what I think their ceiling is, these are the games that are going to matter. And if Air Force is going to be a little bit below what they've been, these are the games that are ultimately going to do them in.
I really look at the first, 3 of the first 4. I mean, the Merrimack game you can kind of cast aside.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you really look, San Jose comes to town week 2. That should be a relatively easy victory, although Ken Niumatalolo is now coaching San Jose, so who knows what wrinkles he's going to have in store for Air Force. But then the weeks, so Air Force they should be 2-0 after 2 weeks. Then they go to Baylor and go to Wyoming. And I think that's going to tell us so much about this team. Just because, they beat Baylor the last time they saw them, but that was in a bowl game. Baylor had some of their guys sitting out. They have had a tumultuous offseason. Their coach is on the hot seat. There's a lot going on in Baylor. So this could, again, be another weird situation. But you're on the road against a Power 5 team. That's going to be a tough situation. So even if you lose that, then you turn around and go to Wyoming, where Air Force hasn't won since 2012. So if Air Force can come out of that 3-1 or 4-0, this is going to be an incredible season, especially given the fact that there are so many new guys. You should see some natural progression as the year goes on. But if they come out of there, 2-2, you just don't know the way the season is going to go, because then Navy comes to town in week 5. You go to New Mexico where you should win, but that's one, you're on the road. Weird things can happen. So I really look at the first 4 games as a major barometer. If they can come out of that looking good, this could be, they could not skip a beat and have another really strong season. If there's going to be some flaws, they're going to be exposed really early in those games, and we'll find out. So, I really look early in the schedule. Late, you go to Nevada, who knows what they're going to look like in week 11. You finish at San Diego State. They've been down. They could be strong again. So, there's going to be a lot of weird weeks in the season, but I really look at the first 4 games.
Well, the first of those 4 is Saturday afternoon at 1:30 at Falcon Stadium. And with the new club on the east side of the stadium, it looks, I mean, I don't know about you, Brant, like it feels completely different with that that club on the east side. It's a different feeling, but and it's a different feeling given that a lot of these guys are going to be playing their first bit of college football coming up on Saturday, but it should be a lot of fun. Merrimack at 1:30. Plenty of content getting you ready for the season opener from Brent Brigham. Gazette.com, best place to go for that, and that will continue throughout the week. Brent, it was good to chat with you the other night, and I got to see you in one of your last Saturdays for a while that you'll be, out and about. So appreciate the time today.
Yeah, it was fun taking in a Switchbacks game. That was a good time on Saturday. But yeah, look forward to chatting with you through the season.
Absolutely, buddy. We will. Brent Brigham of the Gazette. There he goes. 13 years on the beat. Yeah, we're going to do something today starting with CU, but best worst case scenario for our local college football teams as we lead up to kickoff. And with Air Force, I look at that Wyoming game because Wyoming, Laramie has been, there is some weird, it's just weird, right? No matter how good Air Force is, it seems like, or how bad Wyoming, just weird things happen up there. That's one that it's like, if they push through that, then, and get a win there, then a lot is possible for this team. So we'll go through best worst case scenario for the Air Force Falcons and what I expect them to be as we move throughout the week. Troy Calhoun and the team are going to speak tomorrow, so you'll get their thoughts. We're getting you ready as best we can for the season opener, and I'd like to send you to the season opener if you'll allow me. How about a 4-pack of tickets to kick off the week, to kick off the season? 4 tickets to go see Air Force open the season against Merrimack. I'm telling you, the stadium looks awesome. It feels like a different experience. They got some things that you're going to notice that is going to be different and upgraded from years past. Really excited about what the game day experience is going to be at Falcon Stadium. If you want to be a part of it, text Falcons and your name to 719-247-1313. The 13th texter to do that will get 4 tickets to see Air Force take on Merrimack. Coming up next, the Broncos have finished the preseason 3-0. The vibes are at an all-time high, but does it matter when that regular season rolls around in a couple weeks' time? We'll talk about that next here on Extra Sports 1300. The Colorado State Fair is in full swing down in Pueblo, back and better than ever. Free attractions, carnival, great concert lineup, including the Spinners and the Commodores, Ludacris, Trace Atkins, the Goo Goo Dolls, and more. Make sure. It's funny, you wait so long for the fair to come back, right? And you hear the fair's coming back. And then you get into this first full week of the fair and you're like, oh my gosh, I only have till Monday. So definitely plan your visit today at coloradostatefair.com. Congratulations go out to Matt. He is the winner of our first bunch of tickets that I'll be giving away throughout the week for Air Force and Merrimack. Another chance tomorrow, and then the next day. Later on in the program, Switchbacks tickets and Ludacris tickets. So keep an ear out. Keep the number handy, 719-247-1313. And if you just want to ensure your seat for Saturday's season opener between Air Force and Merrimack, aftickets.com would be a great place to go. Broncos, for the fourth time in franchise history, have run through a preseason unbeaten. And credit where credit's due, they looked pretty dang good doing it, especially the last two games. Bo Nix earned this starting quarterback job. It was his to earn. He earned it. Good on him. Some of the other individual stories, especially when it comes to the rookie class, I don't know that this could have gone better for the Denver Broncos. Right? We know it's the preseason. But what else are the Broncos supposed to do? And if they looked awful, boy, would that be ammunition for people. So these were the circumstances, and they did as well as you could ask them to do. But if you're looking to make that next jump to the Broncos are going to surprise some people, the Broncos are going to be this, going to be that, I would guard against that. The Dan Patrick Show, this was on Friday's show, they mentioned this. Of the last 29 teams to go undefeated in the preseason, 35% of them have made the playoffs. A little bit better than a third have made the playoffs. Conversely, of the last 28 teams to go winless in the preseason, 43% of them went on to make the playoffs. If you take Broncos history, you get mixed results. 2005, went unbeaten, went 13-3. Made the conference title game that year with Jake Plummer as the quarterback. 2017 was the next time. That was under Vance Joseph. They ended up going 5-11. During the regular season, that was the offseason where John Elway flirted with Mike Shanahan and was shut down by Joe Ellis. And then the next year, Vance Joseph was in a lame duck year, eventually got fired. 2021, Broncos go unbeaten in the preseason under Vic Fangio. Does not lead to a ton of success during the regular season. They go 7-10. Vic Fangio gets fired. There isn't a lot of correlation that has been shown that preseason success begats regular season success. There isn't. And if you had to lean one way or another, history with the Broncos and recent history with the NFL should actually lead you to believe that it's a better bet to fade Denver than it is to buy into them this season. But I look at the preseason and what success in the preseason brings much the same way that I look at Hard Knocks, because I think you have to understand the circumstances surrounding it. Okay? Hard Knocks. What do you have to be in order to be on Hard Knocks? Can't be a playoff team. In fact, you can't be a playoff team within the last 2 years. Now, you also can't have a coach in his first year, which basically leads to the teams that are profiled on Hard Knocks are rebuilding, to put it nicely. Some of them are quite downright dysfunctional. But let's call it rebuilding, with a coach that may be on the hot seat. Is it any wonder that 10 of the 18 teams that have been previewed in Hard Knocks have missed the postseason? It's not surprising that more miss the postseason, because they're not teams that you expect to make the postseason necessarily based on their recent track record. It's the same thing with preseason. The teams that care, and that's the simplest way that I can put it, the teams that care about preseason, that play their starters, that treat it like a normal game, are usually teams that aren't very good. Either because they don't have a ton of talent, or because they're young, or because of both. And the teams that don't care about preseason generally are teams that do a fair amount of winning during the regular season and believe they have more to play for than preseason success. In general, there are exceptions to every rule, but generally those are the two categories that teams fall into nowadays when it comes to preseason. And the Broncos are more in the latter than in the former than the latter. They are young. Absolutely, they're young. And today they're getting younger. More on that after the top of the hour. They're young. They haven't had success. So they care. They care more. They have to figure more things out than these other teams. And the teams that do that approach preseason that way, are generally successful in the preseason, while not necessarily translating it to the regular season. But the idea of winning is what Sean Payton wants his team to get through this preseason.
I said it to him afterwards. Don't ever get tired of how it feels, to win. And granted, we're substituting groups, and we're needing to get different groups evaluated, and yet we still want to win.
This is a rebuilding team full of guys who don't know what success in the NFL looks like. And a guy who has experienced a lot of success is showing them how to get to where he's at. These reps, these games are valuable to this Denver Broncos team, because you got to know why you win and why you lose, and you got to know what you need to do in order to win as opposed to lose. Kansas City Chiefs don't need to teach that to their team. The Green Bay Packers, who the Broncos played last week, don't need to do that. The Broncos do. The mistake among many, I suppose, that Nathaniel Hackett made was that because they had Russell Wilson, they were good. Right? And I know risk of injury goes over all of this. I understand that, and that was a big part of why Nathaniel Hackett didn't treat the preseason the way that Sean Payton does. But I think a lot of it had to do with we have Russell Wilson, we're ready to compete, we're good. That wasn't the case. Sean Payton came in and said, this team is not ready to win. They don't know how to win, and I'm going to teach them. And the best place to do that is during preseason. I'm not minimizing that aspect of the preseason. Anywhere a young team can have success. But it's different in 2 weeks' time. Every team's best shot, every team's best player, and all the games matter. Right? What I have seen in the preseason has not swayed me much from what I think the Broncos are during the regular season. But I think there are a lot of really good stories, especially when you look at the rookie class, right? Obviously headlined by Bo Nix, but Audric Estime, Jonah Ellis. The foundation of what this team is going to be. They're younger players. There were a lot of really good performances from the younger players. And that's what Sean Payton also wanted to key in on.
I don't know if there were any surprises. I would say I'm encouraged with not only the rookie class relative to the draft picks, but some of the new players that came in that were signed in free agency. And then overall, the makeup and chemistry of this team, I would say it's entirely different from a year ago. And so that's not a surprise, but it's something you notice, you feel, and that's encouraging.
Sean Payton feels like this team is going to win more than you think they will because of him. Essentially. But this team, when you look at it, it's rebuilding. That's what this always has been. There was the teardown this offseason with Russell Wilson and Justin Simmons, even going back to Kareem Jackson. It was about tearing part of this team down to build it back up. This is a rebuild. And success in the preseason and a relative lack of success during the regular season is a hallmark of a rebuilding team. But you could also see signs that they're pointed in the right direction. And I think that's how you look at this preseason. They're pointed in the right direction. Now, how much can they be pointed in the right direction when the regular season rolls around? How much of those signs will be seen during the regular season? We'll find out starting in 2 weeks' time. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, the Broncos have started to make their cut downs. And I can at least say this with the reports that are out today. You thought the Broncos were young 24 hours ago. They're getting younger by the second. That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome in, Drive Time Sports. Ryan Kaufman with you. You can watch the show live on a daily basis via our social media platforms, Facebook, X, Instagram, and YouTube. The handle is all the same at XTRA Sports 1300. Preseason in the books. Now the difficult part begins. Before the really difficult part begins. The really difficult part being, of course, the regular season. The difficult part in the middle is cutting the roster down to 53, which was the stated goal by Sean Payton. Training camp preseason was about finding the right 53. And two players that are being told they are not among the right 53 are Tim Patrick and Samaje Perine. Mike Kliss reporting that Tim Patrick is going to be on the way out. Samaje Perine from other outlets, the same. Both are going because it's a 2-day process. So today can be about finding trades for the guys that you're going to cut. And then tomorrow is cutting them if you can. So the Broncos will seek trades for both Tim Patrick and Samaje Perine. But whether they are traded or cut, they will not be members of the Denver Broncos moving forward. And Samaje Perine, you could see the writing on the wall. You bring in someone like Audric Estime and you say, what he does is kind of what Samaje Perine does. And we know how quickly the clocks tick when it comes to running backs. You have 3 young backs in Williams, McLaughlin, and now Estime. You only have them for a finite time. You only have Javonte Williams for this year. Throwing in somebody like Samaje Perine, it just takes reps away from the guys who need it. Right? And in another aspect of this, sure, is, hey, we drafted Estime. It's about, Perine doesn't want to spend this season buried on a depth chart. I don't know where he ends up. I don't know who has a need for him, but the Broncos don't. And so why keep a hold of him? You could see the writing on the wall with Samaje Perine for months that he wasn't going to be a part of this team moving forward. Tim Patrick is a little bit more of a surprise, especially because when Sean Payton was asked a question about finances playing a role in cutting or getting rid of one of the quarterbacks, he kind of scoffed and thought it was the most ridiculous question in the world.
No, we've got enough money to I understand the question. We feel comfortable with those 3 quarterbacks. I think I've told you already, I see the 3 of them making it.
So with Tim Patrick, cutting him seems like a financial move because they can save a decent chunk of change. I think it's $7 million, somewhere in there, that they can save by cutting Tim Patrick. And unlike Samaje Perine, Tim Patrick, hasn't he shown that through the preseason that he was one of the best Broncos receivers? So I'm not saying I'm shocked that Tim Patrick is on his way out from Denver, but I'm mildly surprised. because Sean Payton has been trying to make it known that they're not going to make financially motivated moves. And you have, is it the same thing with Troy Franklin? Is that why Troy Franklin, we did not hear a lot of him? Because Tim Patrick, they were rehabilitating Tim Patrick's trade value, trying to showcase him. If P. Ryan's departure is based on Estime's arrival, then if this is not just about finances, then it would be Troy Franklin related. But I can't imagine finances had no part to play. So you have a Broncos team that was already young that's getting younger. And over the last couple of years, you talk to people like Tim Patrick, the stuff that he does, the ancillary stuff that Courtland Sutton won't do, like block, like run intermediate routes. Tim Patrick did that. Courtland Sutton's more talented, but there has been a bit of prodding that has gone on through multiple Broncos regimes to get Courtland Sutton to do the other things that Tim Patrick does. Because if he does, then you're like, well, this is a bit redundant, right? That redundancy comes into play, given the body types, given the skill sets. So do we see a more willing blocker in Courtland Sutton? Do we see somebody who now understands that not everything should be, I'm on the outside, I'm running deep downfield, toss it up to me, and I'll win a jump ball? Perhaps they're seeing that internally with Courtland Sutton. And they have a young receiver that they are quite bullish on, even though people were kind of out on Troy Franklin after that Green Bay game. Some of them came back, right? They got him the ball on the end around there. He caught a pass. So I think it's a little bit more complicated when it comes to Tim Patrick. It's a few more things that play into it than with Samaje Perine. And finances with both of these guys have something to do with it. And I've said the Broncos are wanting to be one of the more active teams on the waiver wire, whatever you want to call it. And Sean Payton even talked about it yesterday, that there are a few positions that they are going to definitely be looking at what comes available. And making these kind of moves kind of satisfies a couple of things. One, fits into the youth rebuilding movement that the Broncos are currently undergoing. And it frees up money for the Broncos if they want to go the veteran route at certain positions. They can be the highest bidder. But now it really makes things interesting, especially at the wide receiver position. And Sean Payton talked about it and maybe was giving a little nod to what was to come today when he talked about the wide receiver group after yesterday's win.
A lot of those guys stepped up. Virgil had some key receptions. Bandy's had a good camp. I mean, we knew it at the start of training camp that position group was deep, and then I think you all got to see actually how deep it was. There's some tough decisions there.
Yeah, and I think one of those tough decisions has been made with them shopping Tim Patrick, and if they don't find a taker for him, they will cut him. So you look at the wide receiver room. Cortland Sutton, Troy Franklin, Marvin Mims, Josh Reynolds, all cinches, right? They're not going to try to pass Troy Franklin through, to the practice squad. Somebody will get him. So he's on the roster. Sutton's on the roster. Mims and Reynolds. Now I think Vele was already going to make the team because he's outperformed Troy Franklin. And that's part of it here. If you're going to say that the preseason matters, if you're going to put into it what Sean Payton has put into it, then you need to reward the guys that show out. Right? When you have a Deshaun Vele, or for instance, on the defensive side, a couple of guys yesterday that I think the Broncos need to give serious consideration to. How about Keidron Smith? All that guy did was pick off 2 passes, recover a fumble, and he nearly forced another one yesterday, but the ball went out of bounds on the sideline. I think Keidron Smith is kind of this year's Jaleel McLaughlin, right? Undrafted. He's not a rookie, but just this undrafted, nobody knows who this guy is, comes in and shows out. He should be rewarded for it, right? Vele's the same way on the offensive side. I think Keidron Smith should make this roster. PJ Locke, JL Skinner, who I thought played really well yesterday. Brandon Jones, who we have yet to see, but we know he's on the roster. And then Keidron Smith. There are 4 safeties. Got to reward guys. I think Keidron Smith should be rewarded. But as far as the wide receiver room, I mean, do you take Sean Payton with the mentioning Jalen Virgil? I think more people would say Brandon Johnson at this point, but Michael Bandy's been good on special teams. So I think if you're going 6 at the wide receiver position, you go Sutton, Franklin, Mims, Vele, Reynolds, Bandy. Or Brandon Johnson, perhaps. But certainly a spot opens up because you would have Sutton, Franklin, Mims, Vele, Reynolds, and Patrick. Probably. Yes, a little bit based on draft status, Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims. But the other guys have had their moments, certainly. And we know Reynolds coming in as a free agent. But now that Tim Patrick's going to be gone, that opens up a spot. I like the big playability of Brandon Johnson. He's shown that in the past. But don't forget, when it's down the depth chart like this, special teams matters. Michael Bandy is a special teamer. So we'll see what happens at the wide receiver position. But another guy that I think should be rewarded, like Keidron Smith. How about Air Force's own Jordan Jackson? Guy goes out, has multiple sacks, is noticeable. He popped yesterday. I noticed Jordan Jackson every minute he was on the field yesterday. And not just because he's a former Air Force Falcon. Wasn't looking out for him. He appeared in front of me. Jordan Jackson is an NFL player. Okay, it does seem like maybe the math doesn't work out in his favor in Denver, but the guy should be on an NFL roster somewhere. Why not? But math is math, but like, why not? And yeah, over somebody like Uruzarike. Right? I mean, not to get too in the weeds here, be too disparaging about Uruzarike, who was a draft pick in recent years. And I get the idea of you wouldn't like to cut him. You still want to see what you get. You haven't been able to see what you got. But isn't that kind of the crux of the whole thing? Jordan Jackson is putting off a career where I think he will be handsomely compensated and kind of balancing it a little bit too while pursuing an NFL dream. That's how committed he is. And he's shown out. And your early impressions of Uruzarike or how much he cares about football, he wants to place some side bets on FanDuel and get suspended. I mean, if you really want to get into it here, shouldn't Jordan Jackson be rewarded? They're both NFL players. But if Jordan Jackson doesn't make the cut for the Denver Broncos, he needs to be on a 53-man roster. Enough is enough. He should be on a 53-man roster. And I hope that what yesterday showed was that he deserves that. And if the Broncos aren't willing to give it to him, hopefully somebody else does. (719) 247-1313. Take your reaction to Tim Patrick and Samaje Perine reportedly not a part of the Denver Broncos of 2024, whether it be by trade or cutting him. I would guess, just hazarding a guess, they do find a taker for Tim Patrick. Maybe not for Samaje Perine, although the price tag with Tim Patrick, maybe some teams would be like, we like him, but we want to sign him to our own deal. So we'll see how those go as the Broncos start to make their initial moves down towards a 53-man roster. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, Deion Sanders speaks on the big news of Friday that doesn't have anything to do with how good the Buffs are going to be this year. Join Colorado Springs Switchbacks FC for Witches and Wizards Night. This Wednesday night, 6 p.m., the first fans through the gates will get a goblet. That's dope. Then after Switchbacks FC takes on Memphis, experience a magical fireworks display. Get your tickets now at switchbacksfc.com, or you could get them from me right now. 13th texter to text Switchbacks and their name to 719-247-1313 will get a 4-pack of tickets to this Wednesday night's Switchbacks match. Now, you don't have to dress up like a witch or a wizard, but you're strongly encouraged to do so, and you will fit in better than if you were to wear such clothing in any other venue on any other day. So maybe it's your excuse to rep Hufflepuff or Ravenclaw, or in your Truly's case, Slytherin. 719-247-1313. 13 texter. Switchbacks in your name. I can't imagine that, given the news of Friday regarding the Colorado football program, that Deion Sanders and Colorado thought they could bar a media member from asking questions and that wouldn't come up at any point, especially like the day right after they did that. I can't imagine they thought that people would just read the story and go, okay, and move on. Social media was ablaze about it, and the topic did come up when Deion Sanders was meeting with the media as he previewed the upcoming season and their first game against North Dakota. But it came in a more indirect way, and I give Mark Kisla of the Denver Gazette credit for approaching it that way to kind of ease into the topic, because given what's happened in recent weeks, there's a real worry that you just get flat out shut down. So credit to Kisla, veteran of the business, going at it in a different way. Here's Deion Sanders on blocking out or using outside noise to motivate himself and his team.
I've never read an article or a comment and said, oh, that's going to make me go harder. I'm going to go hard regardless. But that comment just allowed me to know where you stand.
Okay.
So that's the only differential of the thing. It doesn't propel me. Where I came from propelled me.
Okay.
How I grew up propelled me. Like, being African-American, one of few that's a head coach in college football, that kind of stuff propels me. It's not what you say. That lets me know where you stand.
If you aren't affected by it, why would you go to these links to not have to face it? If it didn't affect you, then why have the clause in your contract that says you essentially get to speak to the media people you choose to? If it's not about getting rid of negativity or bothering you, just let it happen. If it doesn't affect you, is it just something you don't feel that you should have to deal with? Like, we all do things in our work to try and make it a more enjoyable experience. Is that what this is about? You just don't think you have to face criticism or give time to anybody who criticizes you? Or Does any negativity hurt the message that you're trying to get across, which is what you're doing is revolutionary and it's awesome and it's changing college football and everything is great? Mind you, by the way, that it was not a negative question or comment that was posed to him that led to all of this. Sean Keeler was just called upon. He identified himself, and Deion shut him down. When Sean Keeler tried to say it's a football question, Deion Sanders continued to press him on why he is the way that he is. So in that setting, there was no negativity that was being thrown at Deion Sanders. But it was, in his mind, a negative person, and he wanted to challenge him on that. And challenging fair, we can have a real discussion on him going back at Sean Keeler and asking him. I don't think Sean Keeler did what he should have done in that situation. I think he should have defended his positions a little bit more, not make the whole press conference about him, but like, tell him I have some questions about the viability of what you're doing and some of the things you have done. I mean, and if Deion wants to continue on, then I get it. You can't go round and round forever, but brushing it to the side, I don't think was the best move for Sean Keeler either. But there was nothing negative said towards Deion Sanders that day that led to that. It was what Sean Keeler has written in the past. But the logical question now becomes, will he do this again? Is by doing this to Sean Keeler, is he sending a message to the media that may be up there in Boulder that don't be a Sean Keeler, or else you won't be able to ask questions of Deion Sanders? It's legitimate to wonder if this is going to be part of the way Deion Sanders goes about his business and press conferences moving forward.
That's being negative right now. Like, you take an approach that I'm going to be negative. I'm not negative to anybody in here. I will challenge you and ask you why or where is this coming from. So I'm not built like that. I'm not built to hate. I'm not a hateful guy. I come with love. I think if anybody in here has had encounters with me, I don't come with the bull jump. I come with the peace and the joy. Now, when you show me where you stand, I might have to change that a little bit. So I'm not going to match your ignorance or whatever. Not saying that you're ignorant, but a person, I'm not going to match that. Well, that's your prerogative. I don't have to come where you are, because my life is complete. I don't like what you say, what you do is not going to change my life.
It's the second time he's brought up the idea of where someone stands. I know where you stand. And if you stand where you stand, that's not where I stand. That's not where I want you to stand. You see what he's doing here. I know why you would come to the conclusion that he's soft and he can't handle it and can't handle the heat and all that kind of stuff. I understand that why you would arrive at that conclusion. And I think that's on Deion Sanders. That looks like you can't handle it. It looks like you're a bit soft when it comes to criticism from the media. It looks like that. I don't think it's that. with Donald Trump, he started this idea of fake news. And a lot of it was born out of some media members, because of who Donald Trump is, just wanted to take shots at him. Okay? Sound familiar? But that quickly turned from, hey, this is like literal fake news, or this is really a news person or a news outlet just trying to smear me and not presenting facts to you. And it took on a life of its own, I think somewhat intentionally, where it became like any disparaging word would be classified as fake news, right? It took on a life of its own. And sometimes it would actually apply, sometimes it would not. For Deion Sanders, it's the negativity. But he's doing the same thing. He's sending a message, not to the media, to his fans. This person, that by extension, this news outlet, is against what we are doing. They are disparaging what we are doing. Don't you believe in what I am doing? Then take the appropriate action. And I saw it on social media all weekend long. Sean Keeler getting dragged, the Denver Post getting dragged. It's fortified supporters of Deion Sanders in the Colorado football program. It's the us versus them. I think Deion Sanders could handle questions from Sean Keeler, but I think he's using this in an offseason where there's been bad headline after bad headline. He's using this to try and take some of the power back. Not the power in the press conference necessarily, although I do think that's part of it. I think he's playing up the us versus them. If you're not with us, you're against us. I see where you stand. And that is catnip to his most devoted fans. And they will be militant towards those who speak up. Not even just Keeler or the Denver Post. Anybody who happens to say, well, I think maybe he crossed a line here. The middle, the medium place when it comes to Deion Sanders has barely existed, and now he's trying to squeeze it out. It's either you're this way or you're that way. You're with me or you're with Sean Keeler. He knew this was going. Deion Sanders isn't dumb. He didn't step in it. I'm going to give him more credit than that. I don't think he just stepped in it. I think he did this intentionally. And I don't think it's as much about he's soft or he can't handle it. I think Deion Sanders has been through a lot. I think he can. I think this is a rallying cry. He only wants to speak to certain media outlets. And he wants you, as a Buffs fan, to consume those media outlets. And it can be a little bit about business or whatever. It's just, you believe in what we're doing. They don't. Choose your side. To me, it's all a bit too much. I understand that Deion Sanders is something more than your average college football coach, but I do wish that there would be more of the normal football conversation. Right? his decision-making in games, his recruiting and it's not always about that on both sides. Right? On both sides of the discussion. It feels unnecessary to me. It feels too much, all of this. But clearly Deion Sanders feels like it is necessary, and I think I know why. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on that. Sticking with the Buffs, let's move to football. How about a little best case, worst case scenario for the Colorado Buffaloes in 2024? That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. And speaking of that state fair and the concert lineup they have going on, Ludacris is in Pueblo on Saturday night. And next hour, I will have a chance for you to win tickets to see him. And guess who's he's going to be there with? Mike Jones. Who? Mike Jones. That's coming up next hour. Congrats to Chelsea. She won the 4-pack of tickets to see the Switchbacks take on Memphis on Wednesday night. So we got 2 of our 3 ticket winners of the day, and we'll have that many every day this week. Well, Not Thursday and Friday, just because the switchbacks will play. But you get my point. Many winning people over the next few days. 719-247-1313 is also a great place to voice your sports opinions. In fact, that's what it's normally for. Steve G says, I just don't believe that a second-year coach, no matter who he is, doesn't deserve that perk of being able to talk to who he wants. I kind of don't know that any of them do. I mean, if you want to challenge people on the premise of their question, then I think that's fair game. It does detract a little bit from what you're trying to do and what the purpose of the press conference is. But if you want to do that, then do that. And Deion Sanders did. I think that's more okay than saying you can't ask questions anymore or shutting down a question from another outlet. But yeah, it's harder to stomach, I suppose, when it is somebody who hasn't done a lot of winning. Right? It would be more palatable if it were a more accomplished coach. Case in point, Dabo Swinney is now canceling caller questions into his coach's show. Remember Tyler from Spartanburg last year, and Dabo got into it with him. Well, according to On3 Sports, that's not going to happen anymore. You're not going to get caller questions. Just take that. And I'm not saying it's okay if you've agreed to do this and now you're not. It kind of looks like you're ducking the smoke a bit. But it's not doing that to media members. So there's a distinction there. And then secondly, it's someone who has accomplished a great deal and feels like they have a little bit more latitude to call the shots in Dabo Swinney. But the fact of the matter is Deion Sanders has that ability, and he is exercising it. Agree with it, disagree with it all you want. CU gave it to him, and he's exercising it. Now, I do want to talk a little Buffs football. And I will get into more of your thoughts because I see a few coming in. Don't worry, we'll got a whole nother hour. But I do want to get to this. Colorado Buffaloes open the season on Thursday against North Dakota State. I am telling you, this will not be an easy game. Look at the recent history of North Dakota State. All they do is make Division I FBS programs pull their hair out. They don't always win, but it's not easy. With all due respect to the folks who are visiting Colorado Springs this week, North Dakota State is a different level than Merrimack in terms of how good the team is. And we just saw in week 0 how nutty things can get early on in a football season. Heck, we just saw it last year with the Buffaloes, who are on the right side of that. Right? Did anybody expect them to, or did many expect them to do what they did against TCU? It was a revelation what we saw. I'm just laying the groundwork right now CU is going to have to bring it. It's not a tune-up game for them. Talk more about that matchup as the week goes on. But year 2 for Coach Prime, that's this whole grand experiment, begins Thursday against North Dakota State. And Deion Sanders over the weekend had a message to Buffs fans.
Now that hope has elapsed, it's time for expectation. And I hope you're sitting there with expectation that when you pull into the stadium or you turn on that television, that we're going to give you what you desire.
I could change the O in hope to a Y. And I think it would be equally true. Right? Doesn't mean that hope and hype can't exist within the Colorado football program, but it's time to turn those two things into, as Deion said, expectation and results, more importantly. Hope into expectation, hype into results. It's time to win something more significant than regional rivalries against 5-win teams. Okay? And I'm not saying that those weren't good things last year for CU. I'm just saying that's not really going to do the same thing that it did for people last year. On the whole. You may very much dislike CSU and very much dislike Nebraska, and it will make you very happy if CU beats those two teams. But I'm saying with CU trying to play on a national level, those kind of wins don't move the needle. They could be a part of it, but they can't be the only thing. And really, when you look back at it, that's what it was. It was those two, and then they beat TCU, who coincidentally also won 5 games. To me, it doesn't have to be the most significant things for me to look at this season and say it's a success, it's progress, it's good. It doesn't have to be the big things. They don't have to win the Big 12. They don't have to go to the college football playoff. They don't have to win the national championship. I don't think those should be expectations. Those could be the hopes. I don't think they need to be the expectations. Because if you aim that high in year 2 of a pretty radical approach at going about things, I think you're going to be disappointed. It's being competitive in the Big 12, week in and week out, and then in the standings as well. It's bowl eligibility. It's getting that extra game, earning something on the end of this season. For Deion Sanders, it's a bit more nebulous.
I don't think even in my career when I played, I never talked about what I was going to do, contrary to what you all believe. Never talked about what I'm going to do. I want to win. Certainly that. If you got to be an idiot if you don't want to win in life or you don't want to win as a coach, that's just stupidity if you don't want to do that. So that's necessary that I say those type of things. But I expect to do some amazing things. Will I share those things that we expect? No.
Worst thing he can do, and I'm with him on this, worst thing you could do is call your shot. And if you listen to Deion Sanders, maybe you thought that maybe he had said something about the college football playoff. Anything that I have found does not say we're getting in there. It's we're competing for it. We think we can get there. You never want to, be so concrete in what we're going to win 10 games. We're going to win the Big 12. You can have those as goals. Don't call your shot. That's how coaches get fired. Don't call your shot. So I don't blame Deion Sanders for being a bit more nebulous when it comes to his expectations. Now, there are very few teams in the country where there's a wider range of potential outcomes than CU. Their floor is low. Their ceiling is Not the highest of any team, but it's quite high. I think the best, let me phrase it a different way. Best and worst case scenario are quite a bit different than each other. There are quite a few degrees of separation. Here's what I say, best case scenario, what it looks like for the Colorado Buffaloes this year. Offensive line issues, fixed. They brought in Jordan Seaton, big-time recruit. They brought in Justin Mayers, arguably the best lineman in the portal. They get Tyler Brown back, who the NCAA didn't give that second free transfer to. They give Shedeur Sanders time, and Sanders makes quick decisions with the football, even if it's a run. None of these 10 or 15-yard playground football type stuff. He operates within the offense Pat Shurmur has set for him while doing some of the things that Shedeur Sanders can do that not many quarterbacks in college football can do. He gets into the Heisman conversation, if only as a dark horse, establishes himself as the best quarterback in the Big 12. They don't fall victim to the week 0 craziness, right? They don't get got by North Dakota State. They take care of business. They beat Nebraska. Dominic Raiola is playing only in his second collegiate game in there. CU goes into Lincoln. Tough place to play, I know, but takes advantage of a young quarterback. Beat CSU to at least get to where they are last season. Right? Worst case scenario is that they stumble through the non-conference. Right? At least get to where you were last year in the non-conference and then go from there. That's where you can really change things. You get to 4-0 with a win over Baylor, which is entirely possible. I would say probable. Now you need to split the next 4 at UCF, home against K-State, at Arizona, and home against Cincinnati to get to bowl eligibility. You get that out of the way fairly early, right? And if you get one, best case scenario, you get one over K-State or Arizona, right? You beat one of the team. If they're ranked by then, you beat a ranked team, then you finish the job against Cincinnati. You get to bowl eligibility. That's done. You know that CU's heading to a bowl. Now it's about the bigger prize. You take advantage of your bye week. You go down to Lubbock. You win that game, and now you're right in the thick of things in the Big 12. The big boys are all waiting for you on the other end of that game, but at least you're in it. At least you're controlling your own destiny in the Big 12. And if you get, first of all, stay competitive, right? Don't get housed. Don't get organed by any of these teams. Be in all these games. You win one of the next 3. Maybe you fall short of the Big 12 title game. I don't think this team's going to be playing for a Big 12 championship, but you're in that mix. You're right up against it. 8 wins. 8 wins. Going to a bowl game. Win that bowl game gives you 9. Going from 4 to 9. Going from non-competitive in the Pac-12 to very competitive in the Big 12. I think that's absolutely the best case scenario for the Colorado Buffaloes. Now, worst case, in many ways, is the polar opposite of what I just talked about. Offensive line, better not great, or Shedeur Sanders has some real flaws in his decision-making. That clock in his head does not tick as quickly as Bo Nix's does, for example. Shows a little Russell Wilson in him, if you will. Tries to always make the spectacular happen. That could be what Shedeur Sanders is. He just has the excuse of the poor offensive line. Worst case scenario is that is the case. They escape North Dakota. They don't win in Lincoln. Vibes are bad. You lost to your rival. Things aren't trending in the right direction. Maybe you get the CSU win, but I think for a lot of people overall, they're not going to be impressed with a win over CSU. So you beat CSU, you beat Baylor. I think that's reasonable. You kind of salvage it. You're at 2-2, but it's not feeling great. You lose in Orlando. Maybe you get beaten soundly the week after by K-State, and then you lose in Tucson. Now you need 3 wins just to get to bowl eligibility in your last 5. They get 1 against Cincinnati, but then lose, and maybe by significant margins, to Kansas, Utah, and Oklahoma State. Another season that ends with a long losing streak, short of bowl eligibility, 4 wins, no progress. You stayed flat, even though you're going to a conference you should be more competitive in. I'll put it that way. And people are definitely questioning the Coach Prime experiment. That's the worst case scenario. Best case is 8. I'm taking the over. 5.5? I'm taking the over. I think this team is bowl eligible. And I think probably 7 wins feels right to me as I look over this schedule over and over and over again. 7 wins. That's closer to the ceiling than the floor. That's closer to the best case scenario than the worst case scenario. I think that'll be a successful season in Boulder. Give me your thoughts. Best, worst case scenario, or which of my scenarios do you think the Buffs will be closer to by the end of the season? We'll do it for the Rams. We'll do it for the Falcons as the week progresses. Coming up next, we'll hit the 3 stories that are driving the show and give away Ludacris tickets as well next hour. Hello there. Drive Time Sports on this Monday. Ryan Kaufman with you. Appreciate you listening, whether it's on your radio, online, or through the new Extra Sports 1300 app, sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health and well-being for all. The number to know for a couple different reasons. 719-247-1313. Of course, it's the best way to contact this show. And I will get to your texts and thoughts coming up in a little bit. That was abrupt. But it's also a number that you need if you would like to win things like this hour, tickets to see Ludacris at the State Fair on Saturday night. So 719-247-1313. Just program it in your phone and forget it. Just call it Extra Sports. Call it Ryan. I don't care what you name the contact, but just keep it handy. Let's start the hour as we typically do with the 3 stories that are driving the show. All right. Let's go new QB 2 in Denver. New QB 2 in Denver. Here's story number 1.
Wilson's taking a deep shot. Johnson's wide open. Johnson's touchdown.
CBS on the call. Zach Wilson balled out yesterday as the Denver Broncos finish the preseason at a perfect 3-0. The stat line for the former Jet: 16 of 25, 251 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown. Couple that with how much more supportive he sounded of the decision to make Bo Nix the starter than Jared Stidham did. Grumpy old Jared Stidham. And many people are saying that's your QB2. Zach Wilson over Jared Stidham. I don't agree. Let's keep in focus why Zach Wilson is in Denver in the first place and what the last few weeks have been about. The love fest that has been going on from Sean Payton towards Zach Wilson is about increasing trade value. He got his guy in Bo Nix. He has a backup quarterback already. His name is Jared Stidham. So with Zach Wilson, he was a hobby. He was a project. And the goal was to try and get another team to bite and to allow the Denver Broncos to trade him and get some draft capital back. To this point, it has not worked, but that was the plan all along. We are in a presidential election year, are we not? What do we talk about with vice president? Probably doesn't do anything to change your mind at the ballot box, but you do have to understand that they are that one heartbeat away. And it's the same with quarterbacks. The backup is one snap away from being put into the game. Answer me honestly. Broncos are in the middle of a game that's up for grabs. Bo Nix gets hurt. Or Bo Nix gets hurt. Broncos can't play him in a meaningful game down the stretch of the season. Right? They're still in the playoff picture, but they need a win. Bo Nix is out a week. You going to trust Zach Wilson? Or are you going to trust Jared Stidham? I know who Sean Payton's going to trust. It's Jared Stidham. It's not always about the most talent when it comes to a backup quarterback. It is about predictability. It is about being able to rely on somebody. And Jared Stidham, he's not going to wow you. He'll say he's a starting quarterback in the NFL. That's not true. But I want a guy that gives me a smaller margin of what could happen. Zach Wilson even showed some of the bad Zach Wilson early on in that football game yesterday. I want controllable. I want a narrower, more narrow range of outcomes. And you know what? As far as Jared Stidham's comments that he was first and foremost disappointed that he wasn't the starting quarterback, I want a guy with a little bit of that. Zach Wilson's just happy to be here. He's happy to get an NFL paycheck. I don't agree that Jared Stidham is a starting quarterback in the NFL, but I kind of like that he believes he is. I want a little compete. Zach Wilson is not fit for anything that the Broncos are going to do during the regular season. He's a fit for what they want to do during the preseason. QB1 is Bo Nix. QB2 is Jared Stidham. And Zach Wilson, if somebody doesn't trade for him, is QB3. And then Sean Payton on the side can continue to coach him up and see what the future holds. But as far as this season, no. No. If something were to happen to Bo Nix, and hey, best case scenario, you don't see Jared Stidham or Zach Wilson's face at all this season. But if something were to, Jared Stidham should be heading out onto the field, not Zach Wilson. Now, Broncos have to now cut down their roster to 53. And story number 2 is 2 notable moves that are in the works. Samaje Perine and Tim Patrick are both on the trade block. And if they are not traded before the deadline tomorrow, they will be cut and no longer members of the Denver Broncos. To a degree with both of these players, you could see perhaps that the writing was on the wall. Certainly more with Samaje Perine when it comes to the addition of Audric Estime. But I think with Troy Franklin's arrival, you could see it a little bit with Tim Patrick. But with Tim Patrick, there's some other layers to it. There's finances. Broncos can save a decent chunk of change when it comes to the salary cap. If they so choose to move on a veteran that maybe is a surprise cut somewhere else in the NFL. But with Tim Patrick, there's also this added layer of it's kind of a continuance of this offseason. Right? If you were ranking the best stories of the preseason, Tim Patrick catching that touchdown pass was probably right up there at the top. Another well-liked, well-regarded, borderline beloved Denver Bronco is now ruthlessly tossed to the curb by Sean Payton. As much as the preseason made you want to believe that the Broncos are improving leaps and bounds and they're ready to compete, even the day after the preseason ended, still a reminder that this is a rebuilding team at the heart of it, and they are looking to their younger players. And whether you like the players or not, whether they are beloved in the locker room, does not really matter as much as you would like it to with Sean Payton. It's a rebuild. And letting go Samaje Perine and Tim Patrick are the moves that a rebuilding team does. Even if, especially Tim Patrick, could absolutely make the case he's one of the best 5 or 6 receivers on this Denver Broncos team. So we'll see if they do end up trading those guys and what other moves may be in store by the time I hit the airwaves tomorrow. There will be a lot more guys looking for gainful employment elsewhere. And story number 3, let's go back to this. I have a few of you on the text line that want to talk about this, so I'll reset for those of you just joining us.
I've never read an article or a comment and said, oh, that's going to make me go harder. I'm going to go hard regardless. But that comment just allowed me to know where you stand.
Okay.
So that's the only differential of the thing. It doesn't propel me. Where I came from propelled me.
Okay.
How I grew up propelled me. Like, being African-American, one of few that's a head coach in college football, that kind of stuff propels me. It's not what you say. That lets me know where you stand.
That is Deion Sanders responding to questions about the decision that he and the University of Colorado football program made regarding the ability for Sean Keeler to ask questions moving forward. And I heard Adam Schefter this morning bring this up, and he knows Deion, and his surprise was that Deion Sanders would do this essentially to give a platform to Sean Keeler, a guy that, I mean, even you may not know who Sean Keeler was before this. I'm not trying to disparage the guy. I'm just saying you may not have known who he is. And now everybody knows who he is. Why would Deion Sanders, someone who has been in football and media and coaching combined as long as he has to understand that he would be doing exactly what Adam Schefter says he's doing. I'm going to give Deion Sanders a little bit. I don't agree with what he did. And I understand that people want to draw the conclusion that he is soft or he can't handle criticism. And that's certainly the way it looks on the surface. I'm going to give Deion Sanders more credit. And I'm going to say he's intentional with this. The news cycle this offseason has not been kind to the Colorado Buffaloes. Just on the whole, it has not. You have Shador talking about every team views this as their Super Bowl. You have the Athlon Sports report that came out a couple of weeks ago. You have this stuff with CBS. You have this stuff with Sean Keeler. It has not been positive. But what I think Deion Sanders is doing is he is rallying the fan base. And he is drawing a line between us and them. He wants to give a platform to Sean Keeler to say, he's not one of us. He's negative. He doesn't believe in what we're doing. Deion Sanders has a clause in his contract where he essentially can talk to media that he wants to and doesn't have to talk to anybody he doesn't want to. And he exercised that. But I think more the reason why he wants to have that in there is so he can make a distinction. And make that distinction for you. So you know, and I saw it all throughout the weekend. People with buffs in their Twitter handle, people with a CU logo as their avatar, going after Sean Keeler, going after the Denver Post, going after people who would chime in and say that I don't think this is the right way to go about things. Right? It's now negativity versus positivity. If you're a negative person, Deion Sanders doesn't want you around to some extent. Right? And he wants Buffalo's fans who can come to the games, who can give to the collective, who can generally support the program, to also notice those who are negative and maybe shut them out. Don't consume what they are saying. Don't listen to what they are saying. And here's the face of it. Don't listen to it. There are plenty of outlets who will be positive, who will not be negative. Listen to them. We got a good thing going. I think that's what Deion Sanders is doing. There have been other examples in other walks of life, like politics, where you can't really argue with the results. And just anecdotally looking through social media, it seems like it's working. I think it's a bad look. I don't think it's necessary to go the lengths that Deion Sanders did on Friday, but I think I understand why he's doing it. And it's not for me. It's not even necessary for the national media. I think it's for you if you're a Buff supporter or a Deion Sanders supporter. Let's all pull in the same direction. We don't have time for this. I think that's what it's about. Take your thoughts on that. Tim Patrick and Samaje Perine out. And the viability of Zach Wilson as a backup quarterback for the Denver Broncos this season. 719-247-1313. Keep that number handy. Just go ahead if you can. If it's safe to do so, program it into your phone, because immediately following this break, I will be giving away a pair of tickets to see Ludacris at the Colorado State Fair this Saturday night. I need DJ to have left me some of the bumpers that he's been playing while I was in Vegas. It would be more appropriate from what I'm about to do, but we press on. 4-time platinum rapper Ludacris is coming to the Colorado State Fair in Pueblo this Saturday, August 31st. Let me try that again. Saturday, August 31st, because this Saturday is definitely not August 21st. See his unrivaled match of lyrical acumen, wit, and imagery. Get your tickets, coloradostatefair.com. Or if you want to leave it to chance, here's your chance. 13th texter So you probably know the drill by now. 13 texter 719-24/7 1313 to text Ludacris and their name will win a pair of tickets to see Ludacris at the Colorado State Fair. I think my plans are to be there as well, but don't worry. My tickets are not next to yours. You can enjoy the evening with whoever you might bring with you. And I won't bother you, I promise. Let's go to the text line and some of your thoughts, especially on Deion. Tom says, I don't understand why you continue to say you're not down on CU and Deion. Every day you talk about them, you sound so negative. Do you listen to your shows? I don't, because I hate the sound of my own voice. But to actually answer your question, it feels like I'm negative towards them because they have done things to warrant, in my opinion, criticism. But this stuff doesn't have to necessarily do with what I think about them as a football team. Now, I went through the best and worst case scenario. I think the Buffs are going to have a good year. I do. Because I think what Deion Sanders is doing will take time to really work. But for the program he inherited, I think he's going about the right way. I believe in his sons. I believe in Travis Hunter. I believe their offensive line and defensive line are much improved. One doesn't necessarily have to do with the other. The only thing that I say there could be a bleed over, and you look at the way last year ended, you look at this stuff, I do question in games, in the season as a whole, if things start to turn, will Deion Sanders be able to right the ship? Right? Will he act appropriately to try and get things back going? Last year, the season got away from him and there was nothing, right? And then the demotion of Sean Lewis and Pat Shurmur becomes the offensive coordinator. It seemed like there were some of the in-game decision-making I questioned. So that's something that I still have. And I think what's going on right now with the press conferences and things like that could be kind of a symptom of that, of a guy that maybe doesn't handle things not going his way the best. So if this season were to kind of go off the rails, one might have to do with the other. But I think I can be critical and say this stuff isn't a good look, that this stuff I disagree with, and still assess them as a football team and say they're a pretty good football team. I think they got the best player in the conference in Travis Hunter. I think they have the best quarterback in the conference in Shedeur Sanders. And I think that they're better in a lot of key areas than they were a year ago. One doesn't necessarily have to do with the other. It can bleed over, but that's why I think it's probably best for everybody, all parties involved, to just get to Thursday. Right? Let's get back to making the main thing the main thing. And that's football. And that'll be North Dakota State come Thursday. Albert, from the first day Deion was hired at CU, there have been a group of strong supporters that almost idolizes every decision. There has also been a group of detractors that would love nothing more than to witness his failure. It's not really hard to see through both sides to know the truth, which seems to be somewhere in the middle. As it normally is. Albert, I would agree with you. This is not I guess one end of the spectrum is they're a national title contender, and the other is they're, Grand Theft Auto, or however some people described it. Yeah, it's probably somewhere in the middle. They probably have some issues like many college football programs do. They're probably not as bad as some people say. They're probably not as good as some people say. Yep. Truth is usually somewhere in the middle, but that's not fun. And I don't even think that Deion Sanders wants to live there. I think he only wants the one end of the spectrum and not the other. And I think that's kind of part of this. Albert adds, without Coach Prime's media group and supporters, he would definitely be taking more heat. Then it goes on to talk about CU and what they could do this season. A good year for CU is 6-6. North Dakota, Nebraska, and even CSU will be more challenging first 3 games than last season, but the Buffs will, in all caps, be better than last year, especially along the defensive front. BJ Green is going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem. I got to see it from some other guys, but he's going to be good. Then we got the more playful takes of Brett. Ryan, given my well-earned status, I have chosen only to talk to you. I'm flattered. You may ask me questions. Go. Do you really believe that Braden Fowler Nicolosi is a better quarterback than Shedeur Sanders? I feel like that's the burning question I have for CSU fans. Because I've seen a lot of it. I've seen some stat comparisons. You can't honestly believe that, right? That'd be my question. Please don't shut me down because of the negativity. He adds, I have hired a lot of Colorado University graduates, but I've never worked for one. Go Rams. It's good. Getting that going a few weeks early. I'm here for it. That's going to be a lot of fun. Going to be a lot of fun. CU and CSU. Let's see. Where's the other one? Mark. Yes, Mark. He is an Arizona Wildcat fan and says, I think with Coach Sanders, it's more the old saying, there's no such thing as bad press. Right now, we are talking about him and his program. And that's always an underlying thing with him. It is. I think he's good either way, but I think that there is also this rallying cry that he's trying to put out there against outlets that may not believe in what they are doing. It's worked before for people in other walks of life. We'll see if it works for Deion, and I think it will. But again, getting back to Tom's text, I don't know how much that affects wins and losses. But it's where we are. It's like the Broncos. It's like the Broncos with preseason. Right? Does the fact they finished 3-0 in the preseason really make you think that differently about what the Denver Broncos can be this year? I would hope not. But what else are we supposed to do right now? Right? Talk about the preseason. What are the Broncos supposed to do right now? Look as good as they possibly can and find the right 53-man roster. What can Deion do right now? Well, get his team ready for North Dakota State. And I have little to zero doubt that he's doing that. But also, he has a chance to try to get the people that will be at Folsom on Thursday to get a little bit of hype and shut out the noise. And don't think for a second that that's not a message that applies to his team as well. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, we thought there was a quarterback competition in one NFL city, and there was not. At least it's clear to me there wasn't. But there may be one in another NFL city that I didn't think there would be one. I'll explain next on Extra Sports 1300. Join Colorado Springs Switchbacks FC for Witches and Wizards Night this Wednesday night at 6. The first fans through the gates will get a goblet. Then the Switchbacks take on Memphis, and I would think it's a fair bet to say fireworks will follow, and they will be magical. See what I did there with Witches and Wizards? Get your tickets now at switchbacksfc.com. Boys need a bounce back. That was a tough one against New Mexico. Not great. But you still look up and you say, 3 of their next 4 are at Widener Field, and none of the remaining matches are against the best team in the Western Conference, so could help. Congratulations to Travis. Won the tickets to see Ludacris on Saturday at Southwest Motors Event Center, part of the concert lineup this year at Colorado State Fair, and also get to see Mike Jones. You know who's a big fan of the Mike Jones bit I did earlier? Mike McDaniel. And that's the kind of company I want to keep. Me and Mike McDaniel, baby. I have the same sunglasses, too. So it has become abundantly clear after Saturday that Justin Fields was never going to be the Week 1 starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Never going to be. If you go out there and you basically give Russell Wilson a series, Justin Fields a series, and then they're done, then you aren't trying to have your mind changed. Right? Especially with Russell Wilson. Because part of why I say Zach Wilson is not QB2 for the Denver Broncos, because Sean Payton only played Jared Stidham one drive. You know, when you play a guy one drive, it's because you know what you're going to get. And you're like, I don't need to see it anymore. And then Zach Wilson got the rest of the game as they were trying to showcase him for other teams. Same thing with Pittsburgh. If you only play Russell Wilson one series, then you've already made up your mind. And if I can say anything about the Steeler organization, it is that they are consistent. Right? Same coach for 20 years at a time, pretty much the same expectation that they're going to have a winning record. They like to stay consistent. And what they have said from the beginning is that Russell Wilson is in the driver's seat and he remains in the driver's seat. This was not a quarterback competition. Now, I could say even in the limited time that I saw both Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, that I think it would be more prudent to start Justin Fields. Pittsburgh clearly disagreed. They brought in Russell Wilson to be the starter. He's going to be the starter, and they'll deal with the distraction of him on the sideline later on. They're going to go to Justin Fields. Like, there are only a few things that I right now feel extremely confident when it comes to this upcoming NFL season. One is that the Pittsburgh Steelers will go to Justin Fields. But they're not going to deal with what the Broncos dealt with when it came to Russell Wilson. They're going to put him out there and be their starter. And I would just caution them and advise them to make sure that Justin Fields is ready, because the back half of your schedule is absolutely brutal, and Russell Wilson is not the guy that you want to navigate that schedule. But clearly no quarterback competition in Pittsburgh. So did we honestly have a quarterback competition anywhere in the NFL? Broncos weren't a quarterback competition. Steelers weren't a quarterback competition. Vikings weren't a quarterback competition. Right? Darnold was going to be the guy, and then J.J. McCarthy obviously got hurt. The Falcons have gone out of their way to make sure you don't see any of Michael Penix, so you don't think that maybe Penix should start over Kirk Cousins. Like, we went through an entire training camp and preseason. Did we get no legitimate quarterback competitions? This isn't any fun. But what's that there? Way out in the distance, in the greater New England area, Gerard Mayo. Not only did he kind of acknowledge that there's a legitimate competition going on between Jacoby Brissett and Drake May, he went so far as to say that May is outplaying Jacoby Brissett. And I know he's a first-year head coach, but if you're going to say something like that, you're going to have a difficult time coming out and saying Jacoby Brissett is the starter. Because I don't know if you watched New England last night. Oh, Drake May is, if the Patriots do this right, and I know that's the caveat to every rookie quarterback in the history of mankind, but I'm watching Drake May and I'm like, this dude is going to be, if they do this right, that division's going to be his. That division is going to be his. He just leaps off the screen. This dude has got talent for days. And if you're, the only caveat was that, well, he's young. He needs time to develop. And I agree with that. What I saw last night between New England and Washington, I don't say Drake May is going to take that division this year. I'm just saying eventually, if the Patriots do this right, New England's going to be back where we all don't want them to be, which is at the top of the AFC East, and maybe bringing forth a reign of terror for a few years where no one can crack through. Like, how does faster Josh Allen strike you? Like everything that Josh Allen is, but faster. Oh, he's big. He can run through you, but he can run around you too. Big arm. And I like Drake May coming out of North Carolina. It just, he needed the most time of any of these guys. Right? I kind of felt like he was the only one where I'm like, yeah, I don't think he should probably play his first year. But the talent it is there. But part of New England doing it right is to not put him in a position that we have seen so many teams put their quarterbacks in the position of playing behind a bad offensive line with no one to throw it to. And no defense to be able to stop opposing teams. So you're asking your young quarterback to rally you back in every game. That is a bad scenario, and that's exactly what the New England Patriots are this year. Their offensive line is full of holes. I like Jalen Polk, but he's a rookie too. Your best, most impressive wide receivers are rookies. You just traded arguably your best defensive player, Matthew Judon. This is not an environment conducive to Drake May having success. In fact, it's closer to the type of environment that would ruin Drake May. The Patriots, if they do this right, have the guy that would only be surpassed by Caleb Williams in terms of accomplishment in this class. That's how good Drake May is. But he also has the higher potential of being ruined because of his inexperience, because he needs some sharpening. He needs some seasoning. He's not Bo Nix. He's not ready to go. And him outplaying Jacoby Brissett, I think, is kind of an indictment on Jacoby Brissett and a guy that every time he steps in to the limelight, it seems like he performs, not to a spectacular level, but he's been one of the better backup quarterbacks in the league. I'm very surprised that Gerard Mayo is saying this. And it's not just because I thought Jacoby Brissett would be better than this, but it's because Gerard Mayo just opened Pandora's box. Now, how do you close that? Preseason is over. He's going to have to find a hell of a way to basically say Drake May's good, but we stink. And maybe that kind of honesty would resonate in Boston and Foxborough and Rhode Island and that entire part of the country. Maybe they'd appreciate it and say, you know what? Yeah, we're not very good. But to come out and say that Drake May is outplaying Jacoby Brissett, then start him. That's what happened in Denver. Sean Payton picked the guy that played the best. I talked earlier about backup quarterbacks and how it's not always the most talented guy. You need a certain mentality. You need a certain je ne sais quoi, if you will, in order to be a backup quarterback in the NFL. But with the starter, it's like, dude, if he's the best one, throw him out there. I just kind of reverse engineering this thing. I don't know why he even gave Drake May a sliver of hope that he would be the starter. Or at least, why not do what Pittsburgh did? Right? Pittsburgh let us all, make our own takes about Justin Fields versus Russell Wilson, but to Mike Tomlin's credit, they never wavered. They never really gave an indication that they were going to start Justin Fields. That's just my opinion and the opinion of many others. Not Mike Tomlin hasn't changed. So there's a way to kind of motivate Drake May and to give him an attaboy and still be able to be like, Jacoby's our starter. We brought him in to be our starter. Now, maybe he can say something like that now, but it's going to be tougher for New England fans to take, given that he just said that Drake May outplayed Jacoby Brissett in the preseason. That is a rookie mistake from the rookie head coach, Gerard Mayo. So after all of this, Denver, Minnesota, Pittsburgh, the one legitimate quarterback competition that we have is in New England. I was far down on my list of potential. It's going to hurt it's going to hurt when Jerod Mayo still goes with Jacoby Brissett because somebody above him in the organizational flow chart is like, do not throw him out there. Somebody's got to step in and be like, you messed up. You got to fix it. And you got to make Jacoby Brissett the starter because we're not going to ruin this kid. I don't think Jerod Mayo doing himself any favors, but put that aside. The fact that Drake May looks this good, that he's outplaying Jacoby Brissett. I mean, if you can stomach the idea that it's still for the best that Jacoby Brissett plays this year, you got to be over the moon as a Patriot fan. See what Mayo does. Now, he does say it's not the only factor, so there's his wiggle room. But again, when he comes out and says that Jacoby Brissett is starting, he's basically saying, we might ruin Drake May because we're not a very good team. He won't say it that way, but that's what he will be implying. Not wrong, but it's a tough position Jerod Mayo has found himself in. But I watched Drake May last night. He was the more impressive of the two rookie quarterbacks that were in that city at the same time. And just to throw this out there before I go, do we need to start having a conversation about Spencer Rattler? I mean, he's not trying to beat out Tom Brady here in New Orleans. Do we have to have a conversation about Spencer Rattler? Maybe tomorrow. But for now, I have to bid you adieu, but not before I tell you about QC Kinetics. If you're dealing with pain from arthritis that is robbing you of so much of the stuff you love to do, there is a new way, new cellular therapies that can get you lasting relief from that pain. And the place to go is QC Kinetics. These are cutting-edge treatments that accelerate your own body's healing properties, revitalizing your joints so you can move again. Learn how QC Kinetics can use these advanced regenerative medicines to treat the pain, enhance your joints, restore your mobility, and give you long-term relief with no downtime. Right? With surgery, downtime. With maybe some pain medication, downtime. Don't have that with QC Kinetics. At least it's worth a free consultation, and they can explain it to you, assess your situation, let you know if it's right for you. It's a free consultation. If you're dealing with arthritis and dealing with the pain that comes from that, at least take them up on their offer of free consultation. 719-347-1988 off Research Parkway on Chapel Hills Drive and with locations in Aurora, Superior, and Highlands Ranch. 719-347-1988 QC Kinetics. Appreciate your patronage. My thanks to Brent Brigham for stopping by the program. We're counting down now. Enough with the practice games. 2 weeks away from the NFL and just a few days away from college football starting in earnest. It is a happy time, people. Talk to you tomorrow.